Welcome to Nancy's Bookshelf, a program of conversation and readings with local and regional writers. Now, here's your host, Nancy Wiegman.
My guest today is an award-winning teacher, fitness expert, dietary coach, and certified behavior change specialist. Lani Muelrath is certified in plant-based nutrition from Cornell University. She is a guest lecturer at San Francisco State University and associate faculty at Butte College. Her previous book was Fit Quickies, and she now has a new book, The Plant-Based Journey, a step-by-step guide for transitioning to a healthy lifestyle and achieving your ideal weight. Lani Muelrath, welcome.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm so excited to be here. I love being on your show.
Well, I love the fact that you have written this book because I think people really need a little guidance, because I think a lot of people do want to make this change in their eating and their lifestyle. Yeah. And you actually have written the book that sounds like the CEO and co-founder of Whole Foods Market is writing currently. His name is John Mackey.
Yes. I met John Mackey, yeah.
And maybe you know that he is working on a book called The Whole Foods Diet. Mm-hmm. And this is based on, and I notice this because based on eating 90% plant-based foods, which is exactly the percentage you mentioned in your book, that we should be aiming for 90% plant-based foods. And this is a quote from John Mackey now. Again, he's co-founder, CEO of Whole Foods Market. He says, we're food addicts. 54% of our calories come from refined sugars, grains, and oils. Basically processed junk food. 54% of our calories.
Yeah, and 90% comes from that combined with animal products.
Well, he says 32% from animal foods. Mm-hmm. Only 14% are whole plant foods. And he said a good portion of that comes from fried potatoes.
Yeah, the French fry.
So he's saying typically 14% is all that we eat of plant foods. And he said that's the obesity problem right there. Americans eat calorie-dense foods. I always say if we were designing a diet to kill people, this is what we'd feed them.
That's pretty well said.
Yeah, so if we're only eating 14% whole foods right now, he says that's the obesity problem right there.
Yeah, and that takes into account the people like you and me who have a predominance of whole plant foods in our diets. So there's plenty of people out there who are barely getting a serving of vegetables a day.
Yeah, because from what I read in your book, that you and I started changing our diet about the same time. And I hesitate to even say I became a vegetarian in the early 70s because I think I was always one, but I just was raised in a house that was not vegetarian, and so I became a practicing vegetarian about the same time.
Yeah, interesting.
Because it was gradual. In fact, I didn't realize even I was doing it. Mm-hmm. It was just a gradual process for me. Mm. And I thought it was interesting at a point in your book, you ask people, which works better for you, gradual or cold turkey? Yeah. And what did people say?
Well, as I described in the plant-based journey, there is a split. And that was a part of the over 1,200 people that I surveyed for the book to get their responses. And I wanted to find out specifically from them, what do you wish you'd known before you got started, and what would you like to tell other people as they're making this transition? And one of those questions, part of the survey, was, what do you advise, over time or overnight? And as I describe in Journey, there was a pretty even split. But even among the people who thought, cold turkey as opposed to
step by step, went out just slightly.
Yeah, but that's very interesting. Of those who said overnight change, their answers were also qualified. Uh-huh. They said, oh, yeah, I think you should do it all overnight. And then they would, mostly it was reading between the lines, Nancy, about their actual experience, because then they'd go on to describe to me, well, it took me a while to do such and such, and then later on I was able to do, so even though they had presented an overnight change, the reality was in incremental changes. And I'm interested in sustainable success, not something that's just flash in the pan. And so that's what I'm all about, is helping people make long-term, healthy lifestyle, sustainable change.
Yeah, in fact, I'm not even sure when I would qualify vegetarian because I noticed I quit eating beef and then pork and then chicken. It was
Well, you went animal by animal, kind of. Yeah, that was your...
Yeah, and I realized, how can we eat animals?
Yeah.
How can we do that? And at one point in your book, you use the initial CAFO, which stands for Concentrated Animal Feeding Operations.
Yeah.
And that just...
The feedlot operation.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is and I was on a group tour last year that did a witness of the CAFOs, as I call them, the Contained Animal Feedlot Operations, to the situation that these animals are in and their impact on the environment. And we did a whole tour from driving from Sacramento all the way down to LA and stopping one at another, at the big ones and at the small ones. It said that had presented the image of, rollicking chickens and cows in the green grass. Yeah, and that's not the reality. So it is a big problem. It's a big environmental problem, and it's a big problem for the lot of animals as well.
And you just mentioned environmental. So if somebody wants a reason to make the transition to a plant-based diet, the reasons abound.
Well, they abound. For example, we're in a drought situation here in California, right? And 50% of the groundwater in our country goes to the whole production of animal products. And that's not just because the cows are all drinking that water. It's because of all the water collectively that goes into growing the feed to the animal. So we have a big waste of resources in that regard.
My guest is Lani Muelrath, and she is a fitness expert, and she helps people. She's also a diet coach. Her book is The Plant-Based Journey, a step-by-step guide for transitioning to a healthy lifestyle and achieving your ideal weight. And this, you're not speaking as a skinny person who's telling other people how to control their weight. You've walked in their shoes.
That's one of the differences of this book, too, in that I've had a vast amount of experience with struggling with my weight, being one of those people who was genetically predispositioned to easily gain and have a hard time losing weight. So I'm not coming from the point of the skinny white doctor in the white coat telling you just eat this and don't eat that and you lose weight. So that there's an element of understanding and compassion and experience that goes into this book that makes a huge difference.
In fact, I sometimes think being overweight can be, if I want to say a blessing, because I have a brother who's never had a weight problem, but he had a folic acid deficiency. And so I thought, oh, good, now he's going to quit eating. This was before he was married. His wife is a wonderful cook now, but he was surviving on fast food. He says, I don't have time. I'll grab something quick. And so I thought, okay, the fact that he is suffering these symptoms, he's going to change his, but what he did was he just goes to the store and buys tablets. Supplements.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, because there is a measure of self-care that when you care about something, it's when you change. And that's really the launch point of the plant-based journey, too, on those 5 steps. So actually, the response to this book, you mentioned that there are other transition books out there, and the overwhelming response to the plant-based journey has been the question of how did you come up with those 5 steps? And also, how is it that you've made it so accessible and inclusive? And the answer to this question is what makes this presentation so unique in the plant-based transition books.
Yeah, because there are a lot of books, and so that's how yours does differ. And the first step, when you're talking about these steps, is awakening. You have to realize there is a problem before you can tackle it. And that's what I'm saying. My brother, so I'm eating fast food, so no problem. He's not overweight. And I think that helps people to know, okay, my body's telling me something here. But some of the stories are rather dramatic. I'm thinking of the person, I don't know if you use real names, named Debbie in your book.
Yes, I did.
And so Debbie's her real name. And she had a rather dramatic health crisis that awakened her that I've got to make some changes. And what happened to her?
Debbie is actually, she's a guest on my monthly teleclass call. She's going to be on this Thursday. She has now lost 100 pounds. Oh, wow. She has continued, and she has now, I've been coaching her now on growing her own plant-based lifestyle transition business. So it's moved from her own personal experience to her becoming very involved in helping others.
But it wasn't just a weight problem that some people had. Hers was quite serious and dramatic.
Yeah.
What happened to her?
Well, because if she had the situation with her eyes, she was going to go blind. She had
you had retinal vein occlusion.
Yeah, thank you. Retinal vein occlusion. Yeah, it's not a phrase I walk around with in my head, but she was in such dire straits, and
she was going to lose her eyesight.
Yeah, lose her eyesight, and she had followed along with
because of her high
plant-based.
blood pressure. And she had followed.
Oh yeah, that was an endless list, and her weight was incredibly
just one
high.
of the things that was
Yeah. So she came to me realizing she needed to make a change because she had eaten better previously and had really good results, but stress overcame her. Not uncommon, like people tend to let go of self-care, and this created her weight gain and all her other problems. So she reverted back. She got connected with me, and we went step by step through reconnecting her with her foundation of whole foods, plant-based eating, and totally changed her life. So now she's no longer has a health problem, and she's lost 100 pounds. So,
well, when I was reading her story, and it said retinal vein occlusion, and I wondered, oh my gosh, did she lose the eyesight in that eye? But no, she didn't. It turned out that I was happy to hear that that her eye healed and was fine.
Yes.
And then your own, we talked somewhat about how you're awakening.
Yes.
But I was amused the fact that you and your husband, when you just got married, joined the Peace Corps.
Yeah.
And you're off thinking, oh, I wonder what country we'll be having this good food. And you get sent to Afghanistan.
Yeah, that's like I said before, it's before anyone knew where it was.
And I have a friend who's traveled to Afghanistan.
Oh.
And when I told him, I said, Lani went to Afghanistan. And the first thing he said was, the food is awful there.
Was this recent? Like a recent conversation?
Yes, because I was reading your book, and I was telling him that.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, the food there is awful. Because he's traveled through Afghanistan in the past.
Yeah, well, we had all best intentions, and we'd had friends who'd been in the Peace Corps, and we did have a particular dietary requirement, and we're assured it should be okay, but we did not select Afghanistan. It selected us just because of the period of time that we were available. But we pulled it together. We had rice and bread and...
My guest is Lani Muelrath, and her newest book is The Plant-Based Journey. Her previous book was Fit Quickies, so you focused more on exercise, which you do in your new book. You emphasize how important that is. And I thought I was amused that you talked about a case study, a woman named Nicole, who was trying, how can I exercise? But she walked her kids to school, and just one little suggestion. And what did she do that changed?
Yeah, well, you can relate to this, right? Yeah.
Yes.
This is part of just to give this in context, throughout the plant-based journey, I give all the ways to build incremental change through not just telling you what to do, but exactly how to go about implementing micro changes so that something can become a new practice for you. And for Nicole, she was just having a hard time figuring out how to fit in more exercise. And what we came up with together was she found that when she slipped on her yoga pants, she felt more energized and more like she was being an active person. And this allowed her to extend her walking of her kids to school to a longer walk and doing short exercise breaks throughout the day, too. So isn't that funny? Just a little costume change.
First thing in the morning, put on my yoga pants,
Yes,
and I'm off to exercise.
Yes.
Well, I noticed when you were just talking about changing, and you said practices. You didn't use the word habit.
Yeah, and I emphasize that in the plant-based journey because most of us can relate to we have good habits or bad habits or this habit or that. But really a habit is only something that you practice over and over again. And to me it sounds more active and more taking responsibility. Well, I'm practicing doing this. Now
because a habit sounds like you're kind of a victim of a habit.
Yeah.
And a practice implies that you choose that.
Yeah. Don't you think there's a shift there? Do you feel that shift in that language? Yeah.
Another thing that I thought was interesting, and we were talking about the fact that Nicole figured out how to be more active, is that you have a sample metabolic profile in your book that you took just maybe a typical person and showed just a typical day, and out of that day, the person was sedentary 22 of 24 hours.
Yeah.
90% of our waking hours, we sit.
Yeah, and this is astonishing. That's what's the value of doing a profile like that is we see, let's see, I sat at the breakfast table for 20 minutes, and then I sat in my car for 45 minutes, and then I sat at my desk for 4 hours. And it doesn't offset, just to get one workout in during the day does not offset all these hours of sedentarism. So I want to point out, too, that you mentioned how I stress that the physical activity and the mindset mastery are important. Those are the key supporting players. And I really want to emphasize about the exercise that most people think that the purpose of physical activity is to burn some calories, build some muscle, make a stronger heart, maybe give you a better figure. And exercise does all of those things beautifully, but it buries the lead at the real benefit of physical activity, which is what it does for your brain. When your body is stuck in cement, your brain is stuck in cement, and it's much more difficult to make any lifestyle change.
And another thing, a few years ago when I wasn't able to be active as I normally was, and I didn't realize the difference when I was able to get back to in my case, yoga practice, my mood was just shot up. And I didn't realize how it elevated my mood to have that physical activity.
Yeah, as soon as you put one foot in front of the other, there's this biochemical cascade I know you're familiar with of a hormonal surge and all kinds of biochemicals that elevate mood. But it mixes with a protein in our brain called BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotropic factor. And that's how your brain grows new connections and builds new neurons. And that's how you can then create new behaviors.
Plus the fact that some people when they're depressed, they want to eat. So if you're exercising, not only is the exercise beneficial, it elevates your mood, then that you might be say, well, I don't need that extra fudge. You
can go directly to get that same dopamine release and sense of well-being by going to simple activity rather than what we often reach for, which is the junk food and things that give us a quick energy boost that way, or mood boost.
And also, I think people think, oh, gosh, Lani, this is I'm depriving myself. You're telling me not to eat dairy, and you're telling me not to eat chicken, and you're telling me all these things not to eat. And yet thank you for including this in your book. You say our birthright is the pure joy of eating. And I think, yes, because when people hear the things that I don't eat, I'm sure they must think, oh, gosh, that's terrible. But I enjoy every morsel.
Yes.
And it's a pure joy.
Yeah.
And I think we're taking the joy out of eating it.
Well, I'm not a plant-based hair shirt. I really like to make a point of that. In other words, I don't eat anything I like, and I think the food has to taste good. I'm not going to rip your salt and sugar shaker out of your hand the minute you open the door. As a matter of fact, that is another unique thing about the plant-based journey, is wherever you are, if you're getting started on the journey, or if you just want to increase more plant foods on your plate, which we can all agree on, right? We all need to eat more whole plant foods and vegetables.
We're only eating 14%.
Yeah. So let's start there. That's how everyone can relate to this process in the plant-based journey. Is I teach specific ways to plantify your plate, bring in more whole plant food so that you can move your way along the continuum to your own pace.
Well, and because you get this question, I'm sure all the time, that people are out there wondering, well, gosh, if you're not eating meat and you're not eating dairy and you're not eating eggs, how do you get enough protein, Lani?
Yeah, that's that question comes up all the time, and some people who teach in the plant-based world start to roll their eyes at that because it's so common, but I don't, because I'm a teacher, so I teach to where the question is. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing is by eating whole plant foods, you can actually bypass the middleman and go directly to the sources of where many people, if you're eating animal products, then we can get our protein from where your protein gets their protein. And there's a huge waste of energy that goes through the process of going from plants through herbivores to a person as a omnivore or carnivore. And you also then are able to bypass many of the downsides of animal product consumption, which is also thoroughly explained in the awakening section in the plant-based journey. So here's the thing. I also have a special plant-based FAQ at the back of the book because I knew
Frequently
that
asked
question.
questions.
Yes, that question would come up. And like I said, I meet the question where it is. I explain how a plant-based diet is now supported by Kaiser Permanente Hospital. They are telling their healthcare providers and their doctors to encourage people to eat whole food plant-based. all of the directives in the American Nutrition and Dietetics Association and also the U.S. Dietary Guidelines. They all have given their requirements of daily requirements for protein. They all say that you can achieve it with a whole foods plant-based diet. And then I go so far as to giving a description of what I might eat in a day and how I easily meet or surpass those minimum daily requirements.
Well, you know, and this was 30 or 40 years ago when not that many people were vegetarians, but I got the question, what do you do for the taste of meat? Mm-hmm. And I was amused by that because I don't miss the taste of meat, and yet somebody couldn't imagine missing the taste of meat. To them, that would be denying themselves something they enjoy.
Well, I think we also need to look at many of our human qualities, such as loss aversion. Loss aversion means we don't like to lose something that we've already had. And this is why I encourage people, if that's a concern for you, then start to move in more of the plant foods so that you can retain some of the flavors you like. That's the problem. People say, but look at all the foods that we have that are all plant-based anyway. We have spaghetti with marinara sauce, we have burritos, we have tacos, we have enchiladas, we have peanut butter sandwiches, we have apples and bananas. There are a lot of things that people aren't aware are already plant-based, and then you can take those things that may be a little more heavy on the meat and figure out how to move in, which I show in detail in the book, how to move in more plant foods and kind of crowd out some of the more harmful products.
You know, I think this may be a battle, if you want to call it that you may be winning, that people are going to start to say, oh, I can get protein from animal sources. But there's one that...
From non-animal sources.
From non-animal sources. The question of how do you get enough calcium without eating dairy? And it just makes me want to pull my hair. Please read the research and you'll see how you can get calcium without drinking milk.
Yes. And it's true, and I also, that's the other part in the frequently asked questions. I address the protein, I address the calcium. And the calcium from plant foods is more readily bioavailable to us, and it doesn't come with the downsides of dairy. And many people aren't aware, you know, a cow is they double their weight in 40 days because of the high protein and the high fat. And human beings double our weight in about 180 days. I'm talking about as an infant.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So the question is there a mismatch here? That's just the beginning. Just look into the research and try to bypass the pressures of the dairy industry and the Dairy Council, which have done a good job of marketing.
Because there's not a kale council.
No,
there's
no
a dairy
broccoli
council.
Force. Yes.
That's right. There's no representative from the vegetables saying, eat us for calcium.
Yes, so important to make that point.
Well, so dairy, there are problems with our overconsumption of dairy, because I often think about the fact that people eat, and wheat is another source, practically the only grain, but wheat and dairy all day long, breakfast, lunch, dinner, people are locked into dairy. And I think you mentioned too, when you first started, was a vegetarian and eating a lot of cheese.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And people will learn, yes, there's life without cheese.
Yeah, there is. And also the nice thing about the whole foods is it makes such a shift in your ability to easily manage your weight, because all the foods that have fiber, no animal products have any fiber in them, which is really problematic for being able to satisfy your appetite without gaining weight.
Well, you, in another case study in your book, you mentioned Jim, who was athletic. He was 67 years old, and he had 2 heart attacks. So he's going in for placement of 2 stents. He asked his doctor, Doc, is there any way I could avoid the surgery? And his doctor replies, not that I know of. And I mean, I know that's true, what you're saying.
Yeah, he said, not that I know of. And then he
did say, though, he added, our hospital has a library.
Go to the research library. Can you imagine wheeling him into, Jim's an interesting story, Nancy. I met him up on the flumes here in Butte County. We were past our bikes riding each other, and he looked so trim and athletic, and we just started chatting, and he said, yeah, I'm feeling great. I'm doing this. I eat a vegan diet. I read Dr. Esselstyn's book, and I go, wait, I'm writing a book about this, and that's how he got into the book. Uh-huh. I said, I want to interview for this, and his wife contributed the portobello pot roast recipe, so the whole family got involved.
And then he goes on into surgery, and then 10 minutes after surgery, he went into ventricular fibrillation, and died, but he did come back, but died in the recovery room. And so talk about motivation
I
for
know.
making changes.
And good thing
My
that Candy
goodness.
Striper was watching the monitor. Can you
Yes.
believe that? It's like,
Yes.
man.
Yeah. But I thought that was honest replies. Doctor says, not that I know
Nah,
of. So I'm
nah.
hoping doctors are going to read your book.
Well, it's got to grow, Nancy, because even though doctors do not get any nutrition education, there is such a force now, and there is so much. And I'm very encouraged by this Kaiser Permanente movement, and also Dr. Dean Ornish's program at the UC Medical Center in San Francisco. His whole food plant-based reversal and prevention of heart disease program is covered by Medicare. So there's a stamp of approval that people who really need the big boys to say yes can listen to.
Yeah. So that is encouraging. Another kind of a mantra in your book is eat when you're hungry. And I think your earlier book said eat when you're hungry until you're not. And this one you say eat when you're hungry, stop when you're not. So you're not telling people starve yourself and make yourself miserable.
It doesn't work. It does not work. You cannot do white knuckle weight loss in a sustainable way. And notice how, with what conviction I say that, because that was my struggle for so long, and why I now have had that successful, sustained 50-pound weight loss for ongoing 17 years now. And that was because of consuming primarily whole plant foods. When I finally gave up the dairy, that made a big difference with my weight, because it's a non-fiber food. And as I say in the plant-based journey, there's those 3 rules of satiety, and fiber-filled foods will make a huge difference. I can't say it enough. It will change your life and being able to be well-fed, no going with the white knuckle hunger. Doesn't work.
My guest is Lani Muelrath, and her newest book is The Plant-Based Journey, a step-by-step guide for transitioning to a healthy lifestyle and achieving your ideal weight. People are often surprised at how much I eat.
Isn't that great?
To be my size, because I do eat a lot, and I thoroughly enjoy it.
Mountains of food.
Yeah, and because you say we typically eat the same weight food each day, but if you change to a plant-based, well, explain what you mean by that.
Well, it's been shown through the research that every day, if you were to take all the food that you ate and weighed it, and then the next day took all the food you ate that day and weighed it, that every day it would weigh about the same. So you have to ask the question then, what does that say about the quality of what is in that basket weighing that amount? So if you have a pound of cheese, for example, and a pound of apples, comparing those two, they both weigh a pound. But which of those two, by the time you finish eating that pound to meet that weight, is going to be more likely to overshoot your calorie needs for the day? So that's just isolating one reason of the hunger and fullness, but it's a really good illustration.
Yeah, and that's why you have a section early in your book called Full Without Being Fat.
That's right. And actually, that section there is a really good preview that is available for free on my website to download, about a 40-page chunk of the beginning of this book. It's a good way to warm up.
Yeah, and you do have a blog, which is, technology is nice in that it's giving you a chance to be in touch with people and to ask them what works.
Yeah.
You're not in your ivory tower saying, you people down there, this is what you should do, but you're asking people, and you've surveyed people, and so you have real people telling you these things.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Lani, as usual.
Yeah, you too.
My guest has been Lani Muelrath. Her newest book is The Plant-Based Journey. You can find this and other episodes of Nancy's Bookshelf on our website, mynspr.org. I'm Nancy Wiegman.
You've been listening to Nancy's Bookshelf. Our theme music is The Mysterious Barricades by Francois Couperon, performed by Warren Haskell. Nancy's Bookshelf is a production of North State Public Radio.